Welcome to the Dean Bleckman Show, live from Long Island. Free-flowing talk with a charismatic, down-to-earth host. Join Dean as he interviews and chats freely with his guests, ranging from superstar athletes to politicians, industry titans, and everyday folk with fascinating life stories. Dean educates, entertains, and most of all, touches people's lives. You're listening to the Dean Bleckman Show, live from Long Island.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dean Bleckman Show. Here in the studios is senior correspondent Scott Morrell, going overseas across the Atlantic, as we always have the company of our lovely and fabulous senior correspondent over there in the UK, Rhea Bowe. Good morning, everybody. Scott, how are you today?
I really feel great today. A little bit feisty, so I'm really interested in getting this episode on the way.
Great. Rhea, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you, and hello to all the lovely listeners.
Good to hear you, Rhea. Why don't you also include our guest here in the studio that's come in, Christian Montalbano. Did I correct that correct, Christian?
Montalbano.
Montalbano.
That's very close.
Okay, that's close. I think Rhea could be helpful with that. It's all yours, Rhea.
Okay, guys. Hey, listeners. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're joined by Christian, who's going to join in on our show, which is War on Cash. We're going to try and imagine what it's like to live in a cashless world, because it's never really been done before, certainly not that we can imagine within our own minds, as it were. So the show will be split into War on Cash for the first half-ish, and the second half will be news headlines that maybe or maybe you are not aware of. We've got Christian here joining us, who is a video editor, has a background in music, and has a background in production, because we're thinking about going to video, because we know we need to go to video because it's kind of more interesting. Christian has just dropped on the mic out the goodness of his heart to see if he can bring something to the show in terms of the comments on what's going to be made on the War on Cash. If you like what you hear, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. But until then, back to you, Dean.
Thank you, Rhea. We have at least another person that's participating here, and Christian at least has another great accent just like you to partake here in the show.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about cash or cashless, something that I don't have a lot of, because my wife Sharon 99.9% of the time uses credit cards. So this whole thing about moving towards a cashless society is extremely interesting. Scott, Rhea, why don't you take the lead on this?
I'll give it to Rhea to start.
Okay.
Okay, so we just take a quick look. It does kind of stretch the imagination somewhat. But just to start off, imagine having no cash. So what I'll say at the start and at the very end is use it or lose it, because there is a big movement to get rid of cash. So this is the fundamental thing in our society. And within the economics markets, the most dominant force is zero. Everything is referenced to zero. If you have 0% interest rates or +7, everything references to zero. Well, in a cashless society, it's possible where zero doesn't become a hard ground zero. You can go below zero. So the force that makes the Fed or whatever central bank stay above zero, so there's not a run on the banks, would alter. And this is a key player within a cashless society. What do you think, Scott?
Well, it's so interesting. Former Secretary of the Treasury, Larry Summers, came up with this, I think, a ridiculous idea to get rid of the $50 bill and the $100 bill, and primarily to prevent terrorism. Like ISIS is not going to have a bigger knapsack to funnel in money. It's really a joke. I think the real reason is because the government wants to track all of our transactions digitally, and if you get rid of the cash, okay, people will be forced to put their money in the banks. And when they put their money in the banks, then the banks and the government could then apply negative interest rates, and that's a form of taxation or fees. And I think that a lot of people are not thinking like that. Is that where your thoughts are for today's show, Ria?
Basically, it's using our imaginations, which is quite difficult to do, and to see what it's like in a world without cash. Although we're nearly there in terms of our everyday usage, because digital transfer has overtaken cash. That the key thing that I want to bring up is if that drops below, if it goes -1, -1 on the interest rates, that means you'll be in charge 1% to keep your money in the bank, Scott. That is as simple as that.
Rhea, I'd like to just reaffirm, Scott brought up what Larry Summers said, former Treasury Secretary and the Harvard president. For the audience, I want to just pass on that those comments on Summers came out of if you want to take a look online, it came out of a March 21st, 2016 article, an issue of Forbes magazine, and the title is "Why Big Government is Waging the War Against Cash." And he continues to look at that the reason is to help in the fight against terrorists, bribes, drug dealers, and tax evaders by making it more inconvenient for these bad guys to move around and to store their cash. Really focusing on, Summers really focused on all the drug cartels and ISIS being interrupted. Before we go back to Rhea, Christian, do you have something like you'd like to share?
Well, immediately this topic, what pops into my mind, the first thing that popped in was actually the concept of Bitcoin. And I was curious what your thoughts on that were, you guys, because Bitcoin is an interesting thing because it's talk about cashless. It's digital. It's a digital concept where there is no money. It's all potential. It's like monopoly money online in a way. And I'm kind of fascinated with the topic, and I wonder, I'm curious to see their trajectory of where the Bitcoin goes. Because right now, apparently, I think it's like one Bitcoin equals $200 or something. And then they have this thing where Bitcoin miners, and I'd like to learn more about it, but it would be interesting to see where that fits in.
But what I always wondered about Bitcoin is who controls the conversion rate and what is it backed by?
I don't think people know.
Yeah. Rhea?
I do.
Okay, Rhea.
Okay.
Let's go over to Rhea on this. Christian brought up the Bitcoin.
Okay, so Bitcoin comes under the heading of cryptocurrency.
Okay.
Cryptocurrency to youngsters, it's something of a way of life and is less familiar. But we are so used to within our currency exchange. The currency isn't really a storage of value. It's a means to exchange. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, if we go to do an exchange, we have a middleman in terms of banking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're always there. There's always a middleman there within that exchange, how you obtain the money and how you pass the money. With cryptocurrency, there's no real central exchange. It's held in many different places, which is a decentralized currency. It's called cryptocurrency. The trading platform is called Coinbase, and there's two main players. One is called Bitcoin, currently running at about $850 to one Bitcoin.
Wow.
So that gives you some idea of the Bitcoin. There was a guy that invested in it last year when it was under $1 for a Bitcoin. He bought $1,000 worth. Well, he got loaded overnight.
Yes.
So he did well. And the two main players in the arena at the minute are Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ethereum, you can trade faster. Bitcoiner is a slower trade. So in short, there's no central mechanism. The whole database is contained. It's rather like BitShare. It's contained within everybody. So you don't need a centralized organization. Christian, back to you.
I have a question about that, Rhea. What causes the devaluation or valuation of Bitcoin? Who determines that? Is that the free market system?
It's free market price discovery.
Okay.
Wow. So as a model, isn't there, I mean, there's something both scary and interesting and amazing and positive about it. On one hand, there's like an organic flow in how it develops, but on the other hand, there's no regulation of it, right?
Oh no, that's not true. Yeah, well, it was. It's less so now because the IRS are now looking into the model along with the government because they're rather fascinated by it as well. If you're 40, 50, 60 years old, we're so used to a central banking system that this seems very alien. But they're very now responsive to it as they see this thing picking up ahead of steam. Bearing in mind, I think what stumps people is where did it come from? I think that's the key player. How did it come into being? Well, the same as any fiat currencies. It's based on perception, unless it has a gold seal, which no currency does in the world at the moment, but used to. The dollar was once gold sealed in 71. But as of now, fiat currency has no real value and is kind of conjured out of thin air. And Scott has an economics degree, so he knows where it's comes from, don't you, Scott?
Yes, and I just want to expand, just go off a little bit on the Bitcoin. I absolutely agree with that. But cash is getting coined, no pun intended, as a dirty word, almost like you're a criminal. If you go to pay a hotel bill in cash, people will raise their eyebrow a little bit. Or you pay for services in cash, it's almost like you're a criminal. Why do you have cash? Everyone has a credit card. One way to fight this, basically, this cashless society is to hold on to gold. And I know that gold is up 16% this year in the markets. And I'm sure you know this, Ria, because you're in tune with European monetary currency. Spain and Italy already had a reduction in how much euros you could take out of the bank. And I think this week, France does not allow any cash transactions over 100 euros, down from 3,000 euros. So they're really trying, with Larry Summers and the European Union, trying to reduce the amount of cash so they could watch what you're doing, tax it, and fee it. That's what I think is happening with the war on cash.
Before Ria answers that, what I look at as the war on cash is the only people that have cash are people that are in the tipping industry. That's the only people that are holding cash. I mean, everything's being done by electronic payments today.
But you know what the problem is, Dean?
What's that?
What about the third world countries? They don't have bank accounts. What's going to happen with them? All they have is cash. And did the world think about that as well?
Well, let's go back to Ria on that.
Well, the world has a huge problem, doesn't it? As it goes into contraction, there's huge world debt, and the debt can't really be paid back. And one of the ways to deal with a new model is to not have a solid ground zero, as in 0% interest rates. It was and always has been the biggest force. And I was listening to a guy named Jim Sinclair, so I'm going to move this on because time's going by. And he was saying 56 years experience of trading, and his current take on the economy, which he feels, and many do, is forcing the cashless move, is he's spoken to the best minds in the business, and the summary come back as this: capitalism is destroying itself, and there is no price discovery anymore. Now, a lot of people may not realize what price discovery is, which is fundamental to any free market. So I'm going to ask the question to you guys: who could explain what price discovery is?
That's a good question. Scott.
To pass it back if you're not sure.
Scott, Christian. Otherwise, we're going to pass it back to Ria.
Well, I think war on cash is really a war on capitalism by way of creating disincentives to save and invest. It is counter to capital investments. That's the only thing I could shed some light on, Ria.
Ria, is it fair to say that this pretty much, with what you just said, has to do with what is meant by a cashless society versus what is the meaning of a cashless economy?
Well, no, you got to look at the motive for why they're driving for a cashless society. The formal line is a fight against terrorism. Okay, so if you buy that, well, that's up to you.
No, I know that, but let's just stay on that cashless society. I look at cashless society as a society in which purchases of goods or services are made by credit card or electronic funds, transfer rather than with cash or checks. I mean, this is a cashless society versus the definition of a cashless economy. There's difference between economy and cashless society. A cashless economy is an economy where a transaction can be done without necessarily carrying physical cash as a means of an exchange of a transaction, but rather with the use of a credit or debit card payment for goods and services. Scott has something to say regarding that.
Yeah, we have like a 17.5 or 17.6 trillion dollar economy in the United States, and the amount of cash that's floating around is around 1.36 trillion. So the claims of eliminating cash to boost the economy, to me, sounds hollow. It won't work. So I think that, I think this is all about control of governments, taxation and fees. That's my thought of a cashless society. Yes, there'll be some benefits and ease of transactions, but I think there's something a little bit more sinister at play.
Rhea, go ahead and continue on Holder.
I couldn't agree more. I don't believe the terrorist line at all, and I don't think many people do. And in answer to your question, they are different things, Dean. We've got digital in our everyday lives, and then you have a digital economy. Well, largely all the market trading, for example, in Wall Street, not Wall Street, New York Stock Exchange, there used to be 6,500 people in the pit. There's nobody in there anymore. Because it's all gone virtual. Is somebody in front of a computer screen. So it's trading in a virtual reality, if you like. When you buy gold from Comex online, if you're trading, it's not real gold, you buy paper gold. So they are different, Dean, in answer to you. But in terms of affecting us, here's an example, right, to keep it on topic, is what if, say we was in a cashless society, what if there's a problem with your account and they unplug you and you end up in a queuing system, and the kind of nightmare that can follow because they can freeze accounts? And if they do freeze account, where are you going to get the money from?
Not only that, Rhea, I believe if I'm not wrong, maybe you shed some light because you're really very smart in the banking system. Doesn't the banks only require 1% of cash as a reserve? And if there's a panic, there'll be a run on the bank, and that'll further the panic. Is that something that you're concerned about?
Well, that's what happens if you had cash. That's what happened in the Great Depression, wasn't it?
Yep.
They went below zero and that's it. Everybody run on the bank as soon as they know they're being charged to keep it in it. Where if it's a cashless society, it's just digital, they can go below zero, because what are you going to do with it? Is the way my imagination goes is hard asset will have more value, will be a store of value, as it were, because as soon as you know that if they go, if you get a mortgage and it's minus 1%, I don't know how that works, but you're being billed, you're going to pull out what money and buy a hard, currency, like buy a vintage car that will appreciate, or invest in solid gold that you have it for yourself. So that's what we're trying to do. Imagine what it's like as a whole, really, Scott.
Yeah, and I also read something a few days ago about Germany, and a lot of Germans are taking their cash and storing them under their pillows. And believe it or not, there's a shortage of safes being able to be produced in Germany because they're afraid to put it into the banks where they might have negative interest rates. Can you believe that?
No, not at all. Everybody in my circles, we all diversified the portfolio into 15% hard gold, not held, not paper, not in storage. We all hold it. And the rest, and then another 15% into hard assets to protect against it going down to zero and below. And as there's been a recent step up in the war against cash, the transfer of the portfolio is going across for everybody.
Christian has something to say.
Yeah, the other thing about the whole cashless society, one of the biggest problems I see is, we're assuming that we're all living in a digital sort of Web 2.0 world, right? What happens, you mentioned third world countries where people don't have cell phones, they don't have internet, they don't have credit cards.
Bank accounts?
Yeah, or bank accounts.
It's a major problem.
They can start their own currency.
Something I'm not that familiar with that I hear that's been around for a while. There's all these social networks like a company called Venmo that obviously I never used before.
I pay my
but
personal assistant that way. It's unbelievable. It takes a second on my cell phone. I'm
what's-
using it.
You know what, Scott? I look at you being my age and my generation. I was going to
Excuse me,
say,
I'm offended by that.
I was going to say, from what I hear, it's mostly the younger generation that's using that. The younger generation
Yes,
doesn't have.
and she's a millennial.
They don't have credit cards.
Exactly right.
They don't have credit cards. So what I've learned about Venmo is that let's say there's five young generation kids, going out to dinner together, that they're able to use this online Venmo that basically through debit card and transfer, they're able to pay for a meal without having credit cards.
Yep. I mean, I take it out of my bank account, but she'll say I need, I work 5 hours, I need $100, and I just get a notification on Venmo, and then I just press one button and it's there within a second. Do you know anything about that, Christian?
Yeah, I do. I'm familiar
Okay.
with it, but my thinking is, what happens when the Venmo servers go down?
That's-
There's like a
Well,
terrorist hacking.
That's what I want to ask you
Rhea
guys.
and Rhea.
That's what I want to ask you guys, because it's my understanding from this younger generation that I speak to that besides Venmo as an app, that you could send money through Snapchat, Facebook, and various other apps.
Yeah.
So Christian is bringing up a great point. What happens if these shut down? Basically, you're
You have no money.
Basically your digital wallet
Done.
shuts
You're
down, and you can't pay for anything.
What's worse? I have a question. What's worse, losing your wallet, the old-fashioned way is a pickpocketer and you lose your wallet, or losing your whole ability to get all your money out of a bank? Which one is worse? Obviously, it's that.
Being hacked, I think, is a very scary, scary thing. In the last 5 years, I feel like we're a little bit behind in terms of our preparation for it. And I think it's a threat. We all focus on the tangible aspects of war and bombs and wars and death and dismemberment, but the virtual death and dismemberment that can happen.
I agree with you,
being
Christian. And I want to go back to Rhea. I think it's extremely dangerous that all these accessible social media apps, including this Venmo that I've learned about, that social media, I mean, there's so much access to your accounts. I mean, all this is a learning curve for me because as I said, my wife handles all transactions for the family, and very little is done by cash.
Dean,
There's very active credit card use used
Dean.
here in this family, except for some very local special restaurants that we love to go to that are independent family small businesses that the only transaction they take is cash.
Team, but you're still, in my opinion, a little bit behind, because before the show, I saw you have like a stack of hundreds around a rubber band. You don't even use a wallet. It's the old rubber band.
in a coffee can.
Just want to keep it light, guys. Rhea?
Oh, okay. Sorry, you didn't pass it to me. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's fundamental. I think all in all, if you could bring it to some kind of summary, as human beings, I worry that our lives are in a constant state of reduction. You can't do this, you can't do that, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And with that, I think this move on the cashless thing is big, really big. And it makes us so much more vulnerable to be controlled, in a nutshell.
There's a lot of issues regarding this, Rhea. All across, we could do hours on this subject, this topic. There's so much to talk about.
Just be aware of governments that are trying to get rid of cash, because what they really want to do is ensure taxation, and they're not thinking, just like Christian said, about the hacking, power outages, the poor, and so forth. So this has to be really handled with a delicate hand, and our technology could do all these things, but we're not ready for it. There's too many risks.
I mean, you look at here in the States, how many, besides social media apps, how many different credit cards there are accessible here in the States to where people can't wait to use their credit cards, whether it be at restaurants, hotels, travel, you get to, the more money you spend, the more points you get.
It's a game.
It's a game. I mean, Scott Morell, I remember him telling me that he's one of the biggest users of Ritz-Carlton hotels in the world. And he keeps telling me he's got this huge buildup of points for that he spends all this money, Rhea, and he travels all around the world and stays at Ritz-Carlton's.
And Singapore Airlines.
What do you have to say about that, Rhea?
Thank you, Dean.
I think good for you if you can get away with it, but always keep some cash in your back pocket, I think.
Good idea.
So, Scott, on that note, what is the best credit card that's out there to use for points?
Well, okay, I don't have it anymore, but I used to have an American Express Black Card, and it had so many benefits. It was a $2,500 fee, believe it or not, and then they raised it to $5,000 to $10,000. But I was there in 2000 when I got the card, and then I just said it's enough with this already. But when I had it, the upgrades were unbelievable. The points were easily transferable, and I used to go to the Orient and Singapore Airlines and Cathay Pacific first class and not pay anything except maybe $5.60 in taxes. So they've been reducing those benefits recently because there's so many other cards that are coming out. So I don't know.
Christian's sitting here extremely quiet, Scott. What do you have to say about all this, Christian?
I am not an expert on having an American Express Black. I've actually been, back in 2009, I had a business declared bankruptcy, and it was unfortunate, sort of a trifecta of unfortunate circumstances between a divorce, bad economy, and the business tanking.
I went through similar situations, so I could appreciate it.
Yeah, it was very
That's
intense.
why I said I had a former American Express Black Card.
Well, now I
have a Western Union card.
It's funny because, over the years, but let me just say, not having credit cards did make me feel incredibly vulnerable. And the one if there's a positive thing about credit cards, it's owning a credit card and depending on it is kind of like saying, well, I have potential to make money. And until that potential is met through making cash, I'm going to rely on the credit cards they're going to help me get through this period. And I think there's something really sort of life-saving to that psycomagically.
Well, we do need credit to for anything, even for a mortgage.
Yeah.
No one's going to put down $1 million on a house.
Yeah. So, I think having good credit rating and having big credit amounts is sort of, in terms of being wrapped into your own identity, it's like saying this person has X amount of credit. They have X amount of money-making potential, which it's an interesting concept.
It also says you have a value there's a value. Rhea, I like that old system. I mean, we're calling it old compared to the cashless society. Wouldn't you like to see that old system continue for a while rather than what they're doing, Rhea?
I would. I think it's a really fundamental thing. I can't look back through history and see a previous successful model on a cashless society, obviously, because the technology's only just got there. So to do such a big move globally as well, India, Australia, the US, the UK, I think the people should be on the equation, on the decision, because they're supposed to work for us. So to put it out on some kind of referendum, which obviously they're never going to do, but ultimately would be the way forward, and to educate people as well. And I don't think the terrorism line is swinging it. If you want to stop a terrorist, guys, don't give them guns.
Yeah, no one's believing the terrorist line, and I think there's no analogy to this. The only thing I was thinking about, which isn't an analogy because it's asset based, is the old barter system. But that wouldn't be a good analogy, right, Rhea? Because you still
then you'd have price discovery.
Right.
So basically, the price discovery thing that if you spoke into the economy, not just the US economy, the world economy, is price discovery in its simplest form is this, which incidentally, a lot will tell you don't exist anymore. I could give you the reasons why, but ultimately, let me just explain. Let's say you're in your backyard and you're growing potatoes and your neighbor is growing carrots. You look over his fence and go, I'd like some carrots. He looks over yours and says, I'd like some potatoes. So you two have a quick chin wag across the fence, and matey with the carrot says, I'd like a potato. You say, well, and I'll give you a carrot. And he says, well, no, my potato's worth more than your carrot. Do you know what I mean? And that bartering begins and a price discovery happens. if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
3 carrots to 1 potato, right? That is price discovery. So you do that on the Monday, then you go back on the Wednesday to do the same transaction, but it could have moved through various different forces at work. Somebody else could start selling potatoes down the road, so therefore it alters the value, and you're in this constant free market of discovery, of price discovery. The problem is at the moment, which I'll get to when I get to the news and it'll become more evident, is where money is born in the US, which not many people know about, I don't think, is if the economy starts to fail because there is no real price discovery, the Fed can produce money, buy equities in the United States and keep the money up. So from the very points where cash or money enters the system is supported by an artificial system, run that on a few years and before you know it, there's no price discovery. So that is why they're saying that capitalism has kind of destroyed itself, Scott, although that's a bit of a long-winded answer.
That's beautifully said and very poignant. And yes, we talked about that in many other episodes, Ria, about what is where does money come from? I remember that whole episode, and it's really printed by basically a cabal of bankers that went to Jekyll's Island back, as you said, in the early 1900s. And it's this private entity that is controlling, the monetary system. It's unbelievable that it's gone this far. I don't know if that's a tangent or if that's part of where you're going with the cashless society.
Oh, well, it's still, I find myself leading back to all current models outside of the Jekyll Island meeting place they call the duck hunting trip. To move away from that don't know, that 0% dominant force within the economy, if they go cashless, is no longer going to be as dominant as what it was. And we've never experienced life anywhere in the world where zero is not hard. So that presents a real problem. But time's getting on. I've got some more news about the Fed. I've got some belter stories here.
Good.
So if we just wrap up here, then we'll move on to the news. I've got somewhere I'm just going to flash across, and I've got a couple that I'm going to throw into you guys to get some feedback. Until then, back to you, Dean.
Okay, Ria, once again, that Bill Holter video on the wickedvid.com website was extremely informative, educating, and very powerful. Very powerful. I mean, very concerning, his thoughts on the collapsing of the banking system. I mean, really his focus on fraud and terrorism, in a cashless society, bankruptcies, collapse of bonds. What Holter has to say is very, very scary when you listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's many on the same wavelengths as well, Dean. You got some good guys. You got Bill Holter, Jim Sinclair. They sort of work together.
I'm very concerned that a digital currency would be vulnerable to disruption by fraud or terrorist attacks.
Oh, well, that's the problem, isn't it? We can't look back in history to find answers, to see how it works. It's such a significant thing that I feel it should be out amongst the people, and the people should have a greater understanding rather than just go, well, it doesn't really matter, sort of thing. I can tell you, for your kids and your kids' kids, it's going to matter. So it's quite important. Are we ready for me to do the online news, then the mainstream?
I cannot be more excited.
Go ahead,
Let's
Ria.
go, Ria.
Okay, here we go. Talk on the underground, okay? Online news. Here's some topics. Are the Fed going to crash the economy on Trump's watch? There's a lot of talk about that. Mass surveillance, separately, moving on. Mass surveillance is not about terrorism, but it's about control. Another one, the US and Russia agree. Oh, so this is about Syria. They had a meeting a week ago regarding trying to find peace for Syria because people are dropping like flies. They had a brilliant meeting a week ago and they agreed. It looked like America changed its stance and was looking for peace. Well, that found its way on the underground, and people in Syria, as well as people of the world, were very excited to possibly see hope on the horizon. But this week, when they were supposed to meet, which was Tuesday, just gone, the US pulled out of the meeting. And I want to play you the State Department's official line and what he said, why they pulled out of it, because a lot of people feel let down because one minute they've got hope and then the next minute they haven't. So let me just play you a quick clip. It's not that long. Have a listen to what the State Department said their reasons why are.
The status of those talks. Why were the meetings, as I understand the meetings, certain meetings that were due to happen this week were canceled? What happened?
Sure. I mean, again, we're just not, without getting too much into the details or the substance, we're just not at a point yet where we can say that getting together to have these talks would be constructive. When we get there, we'll do it. And I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to, be mysterious. I'm just saying I'm not going to get into the substance of our diplomatic discussions.
Incredibly convincing, I thought.
Boy.
Okay,
Wow.
so oh my God, don't just I felt
No words.
Okay, yeah, no words. Okay, here we go. Some more talk on the underground. Communist style censorship is probably the biggest story on the net. It's amazing. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger with Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I'm going to get on to some mainstream news that wasn't on the underground, which will bring more substance to that line. There was a 6-day artificial intelligence conference starting in Limerick, Ireland today to try and discuss the morals that should be and values that should be involved with artificial intelligence, which isn't really in our lives yet, but it soon will be. Another quick story is there's talk that there's going to be mainstream media whistleblowers just around the corner. None just yet, because they're axing jobs in the mainstream media and the individual isn't going to like it. Soon there's going to be some whistleblowers saying what goes on behind the scenes. And then we're going to go to 3D printing to change the face of manufacturing if the powers allow. If you don't know too much about 3D printing, look it up. It's amazing. It could change the face of manufacturing, but the authorities have put patents out to hold it still. Okay, this is more of a join-in thing, guys, just coming into the mainstream news. The Middle East is ramping up with Turkey declaring war against Assad. So Turkey's come out, I think you probably know this, Turkey's come out and said, right, we're declaring war on Assad, but because Turkey is part of NATO, that has NATO implications. So it's gone quiet. It's like nearly a week old now, but that could go terribly wrong. A story that broke today is Pentagon buries report on how to reduce military spending. That is in your mainstream because I've seen it on there. They've got caught quite badly there. So keep an eye on that on the news, which should be in the next few days. Police officers across Britain are expected to be issued with new, powerful US-made X2 taser guns. So yes, the England's getting in the weapons story. So police officers are going to go from their bobby sticks to these electric, powerful guns. Snoopers charter in the UK that came through a week or two ago went through. I've just found out that all British members of Parliament are exempt. Brilliant. One rule for them, another for us. This one is really interesting as well. It looks as though the Orwellians' Ministry of Truth has arrived, with government and social media outlets, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, etc., have now got together. This is from that big meeting, Dean.
Wow.
If any of those organizations see any content that they don't deem to be truthful and for their agenda, they're going to mark it with a digital signature, immediately distribute it, take it down and report it. So this is a new level of censorship. Excuse me. Don't worry, get into your bit, guys, a second. A problem with diesel cars and trucks. There's been another large meeting with 4 cities proposing banning diesel cars and trucks by 2025.
Wow.
And that's Paris, Mexico City, Madrid, and Athens.
Unbelievable.
So that's quite big as well. Okay, so there's a bit to be getting on with. So we've got another audio clip. You know, Dean, you was talking the other day about we're basically livestock here in the UK now. There is no privacy. We're kind of monkeys with car keys. It's kind of that thing going on. Right? Okay. So, but however, as I reported on the show about 6 weeks, 2 months ago, there was a bill called Rule 41. So Rule 41 is along the similar lines as our Snoopers Charter Bill. Have a listen to this of what has come into effect only, 8 days ago. Have a listen to this.
FBI has been given carte blanche to hack victims of cyber crimes. Congress failed to block the controversial Rule 41 proposal in its final hours yesterday. Simone Del Rosario reports on how security for hundreds of thousands of people could be compromised.
3 times Wednesday, a group of bipartisan senators tried to keep an amendment to Rule 41 from going through on December 1st. And 3 times, they failed. The new change to Rule 41 will regularly allow judges to issue search warrants to hack into computers outside that judge's jurisdiction. A single search warrant can now serve to hack into numerous computers in multiple jurisdictions.
So you've joined the club,
Wow.
guys.
Wow. That was powerful. Rhea, that was very powerful.
Yeah, no, it's going on, isn't it? They're clamping down. See what I mean? This reducing thing. Our lives are reducing, and I don't like that. Here's another one. This is on DEA spending. This is a very short clip. This is Jason Chavez talking about the DEA spending problem and about informants. So when the cops go on the street and they need some information, they give the villains or ex-villains or maybe not villains a bit of cash. Well, there's an allowance for that. And he's about to read out how much they've spent giving these guys the odd sort of $50 to talk or whatever. Have a quick listen to this. This is in Congress.
But these sources don't necessarily give up the goods for free. They want something in return. From 2010 to 2015, the DEA paid some $237 million to 9,000, or roughly half of its confidential sources. The average payment per source is roughly $26,000.
What? I could tell them. Do you know what I mean? That's a lot of money, right?
It's a lot of money.
Wow. That is a lot of money. That is kind of scary. Right, into your bits now. So this is where you guys come in.
Wow. Well, you brought up a lot of topics. I don't know where to start.
Yeah, I will say this, Rhea, that our nice guy guest here today, our special guest, Christian Montalbano. Did I pronounce that correct?
Perfect.
Great. That's one of the hardest things being a host of a radio show is
Absolutely.
is getting used to pronouncing names correctly.
Yes.
But Rhea, I just want to share with you that it was unbelievable watching our guest Christian here, just listening to you, shaking his head, his mannerisms, his expressions. It's unbelievable. What is so great about this show that's been created is not only the friendships that have been made, but I really don't know of any non-mainstream media show that's online like this. That here we are sitting in my home in Setauket, Long Island, in New York. For those people that don't know where Long Island is or Setauket, it's about 60 miles east of New York City in the North Shore. And that we're able to, with Rhea, our senior exclusive European correspondent, to bring global, powerful news and interaction of inspiring, educational. You've got to remember, Christian, over there in Europe, where Rhea is in the UK, that people here in the States or even in New York or Long Island, our cultures and our worlds are so far apart and so different that it's just been a great experience with the show to be able to have someone like Rhea firsthand on the ground. To be able to bring global stories, subjects, news from all around the world.
Well, they're great topics, though, and they're so relevant. And I just listen. I mean, all the stuff you guys have been talking about have been so close to my heart, especially the last year. 2016's been
Scott,
nice.
I think you have something to say.
I mean, when we talk about Rhea and so forth, I mean, like I'll say to you, hey, or yo, or what's up, and she's still enthralled with the monarchy, your lady, your grace, your majesty. So we got to get past that. Okay, but disregarding that, notwithstanding that, there are a few things that I wanted to talk about that hit me, and actually, I was driving with Christian to the studio this morning. We were talking about fake news, and and one of the episodes before, we have to be the editors of our own news, which is good and bad. We have an obligation to work at it, and so I understand what you're saying, Rhea, that Google and Facebook and all those other media platforms are now going to become an editor because I guess the government and maybe the social platforms don't feel comfortable enough with the general public being able to sort out what real news and fake news is. As you know, there was this big crime this week in, I think it was Washington, with a pizzeria. They said someone had a gun, and someone comes in. Right, Pizzagate. And so people are falling for this fake news. And, a lot of the American public is smart, but we're very well uninformed. There's a lot of low-hanging grape, and the concern is that they will not check the sources out for fake news, and we'll see the ramifications. That was one thing. The other thing that I thought was interesting was your discussion about Turkey, and that part of NATO. Now I know Erdogan, what's his name? The prime, yeah. He's been a little bit anti-American recently because we're harboring what he calls a cleric that started the coup. That is interesting. So he's against Assad. We're against Assad. He's NATO. So he kind of needs us right now. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I don't know where that story is going. And I like the idea finally of getting rid of the bobby sticks. I always laughed at that. So the tasers is not the gun, but I think that might have been good in 1812. But the better taser I think is a good idea for the British.
Yeah, no, I like the that culture of England and afternoon tea, and we mix with the Queen is all very lovely, but those days have long gone, I've got to say. So how you typify the monarchy and the people that were behind the monarchy, bearing in mind there's two major differences between an American citizen and a British subject. We are subjects of the Queen. You have rights. We do not. So it's really different, Right, I've got two more news articles that I'm just going to go through, and these are eye-openers if you're ready for this. US government news statistics. Now, somebody put a report together. I've checked these. They've been out public, although you won't have heard them because they don't want you to hear what I'm about to say. But nevertheless, here we go. The US government has a PR department that employs 5,000 people. They are entirely dedicated to PR, spin, rebrand, how to get through to people, 5,000 people, right? The entire Department of Education employs 4,081. So what does that tell you about priorities, guys?
Wow.
Well, I know the Republican Party is really against federal Department of Education. So do you think that's a political question?
I think it's you have 5,000 people employed for PR and you have 4,081 in the entire education department.
I think Christian's waiting to make a comment on this.
Well, I was going to say, you're right. It really does show where our priorities are. And I think it really goes to, if we can all agree that one of the biggest issues in our country is the education system. I mean, you're talking about an education system that's based on an agrarian society. Kids get off in public schools at 2 p.m. to work the farms. They have the summers off, going back to, harvest. It's really a very old system, but, our priorities are really, really mixed up in this country. So I think that is a glaring indication of where our priorities are. And now, when you look at the new administration that's going to be coming in, doesn't give a lot of hope in terms of schools in America and the education system here. So
yeah, that's.
But that does not surprise me, though. Those facts, the PR.
Okay, the plot thickens.
Ooh, I love it.
Here we go. Out of those 5,000 PR people in the government, 60% is dedicated to entirely weapons.
Wow.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right, so there's a bit more. Education 4,081, PR 5,000, 60% of which is dedicated entirely to weapons, okay? Would you like to hear, and you can say no, the weapons sales list from the UK to the rest of the world for April, May, June, and July?
Wow.
I would say to the rest of the world, I would say 2 billion.
You ready?
Yep.
You want the list?
Sure.
Yes.
Here it comes. July 1st, Chile, 140.1 million.
Wow.
April the 29th, France, 30 million. May 3rd, Tunisia, 100.8 million. July 5th, Israel, 300 million. May 11th, Egypt, 143 million. May 24th, Kuwait, 420 million. June the 14th, Iraq, 181 million. 2 sales in the UAE on the 15th and the 11th. One in July, one in May. One of 785 million.
Oh my God.
One of 476 million. May 24th, Qatar, 20 million. May 24th, Oman, 260 million. July 1st, Korea, 65 million. July 15th, Japan, 821 million. Australia, May the 27th, 301 million. Australia, April the 21st, 1.22 billion.
Wow. What'd you think of those numbers, guys?
Those are pretty good numbers.
Yeah, those
Wow.
Big business.
Wow.
You know, I just want to say one thing, and it has nothing to do with this, but we talk about the British monarchy, and we're getting towards the end of our show. I just watched on Netflix a phenomenal show about Queen Elizabeth. It's called The Crown. I would encourage every one of our listeners to watch that show. Rhea over there, if you get Netflix, it's amazing, and they just finished their first season. They bring out all 10 episodes. It just reminded me, as we were talking about the difference between British subjects and American citizens.
Rhea, have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't. I'm a British subject, so I can't afford such things.
I'll buy you the subscription. Will you see it?
Scott, you haven't asked Rhea what cocktail she's having during this show today.
Well, it's the normal times. The gin and tonic with a slice of lime. If it was later or Sunday morning, I would go with a mimosa. A little bit later, maybe a straight cognac. So I think it's the gin and tonic.
Another thing that I was surprised earlier that you said that you happen to be the driver out from Long Island City with Christian being the passenger.
Don't start
that
with this.
I'm a little surprised that it wasn't the other way around. Christian driving you after 2 minutes coming out of Long Island City, a police officer pulling you over for using your mobile device.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the fact that you keep reminding me of that nightmare. Thank you, Dean.
As you can see, to be a guest on this show, we welcome all our listeners. That anybody that is worldly, educational, inspiring. People have to have a little bit of a sense of humor, like we have here on this show, to keep it light, full transparency. We all have a lot of fun. Scott takes my kidding. But,
absolutely, it's all good.
We welcome anyone from around the world that would like to participate on any of these team type of shows to please go to the website. They could go to deanbleckman.com, write to me directly through the website, or just directly email me at dean@deanbleckman.com if they want to participate on the show. So as you can see, we do a little kidding. Rhea, is there anything else that you want to finish up with?
I would like to do the creme de la creme, if you don't mind. I have one really big one and one very positive one, and it's quite hard to find big positive news. But to round up this eye-opening episode on what is going on, as you guys are aware, I've been chasing down the $9.3 trillion or 9.3 million millions that have gone missing with no effect, if you remember, and I'm sure you do.
Well, you've been using a shovel. I think you should try a little bit more sophistication, Rhea, please.
We got somewhere, okay? So I do have news for people that do follow us. they have got the Inspector General of the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve in Congress to ask them where the money is. So I'm not making it up, and I have a clip here for you of this lady who is again the Inspector General of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, okay? Have a listen to this lady in Congress.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Inspector Coleman, you're the Inspector General for the Federal Reserve, right? Okay.
That's correct.
Have you done any investigations concerning the Federal Reserve's role in deciding not to save Lehman Brothers, which led to shockwaves that went through the entire financial system?
In that particular area, I don't generally comment on specific investigations, but we do not currently have an investigation in that particular area.
What about Bloomberg's report that there are trillions of dollars in off-balance sheets transactions that the Federal Reserve has entered into since last September? Are you familiar with those off-balance sheet transactions?
I think it may be important at this point, too, just to bring up a certain aspect related to our jurisdiction. And just to clarify perhaps some of my earlier comments, we do not have jurisdiction to directly go out and audit Reserve Bank activities specifically.
Well, I have a copy of the Inspector General Act here in front of me, and it says, among other things, that it's your responsibility to conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the programs and operations of your agency.
That's correct.
So I'm asking you if your agency has, in fact, according to Bloomberg, extended $9 trillion in credit, which, by the way, works out to $30,000 for every single man, woman, and child in this country. I'd like to know, if you're not responsible for investigating that, who is?
We have responsibility for the Federal Reserve's programs and operations, audits, to conduct audits and investigations in that area. In terms of who's responsible for investigating, would you mind repeating the question one more time?
What have you done to investigate the off-balance sheet transactions conducted by the Federal Reserve, which, according to Bloomberg, now total $9 trillion in the last 8 months?
I'll have to look specifically at that Bloomberg article. I don't know if I have actually seen that particular one.
That's not the point. The question is, have you done any investigation or auditing of off-balance sheet transactions conducted by the Federal Reserve?
We're still in the process of conducting that review. Until we actually, go out and gather the information, I'm not in a position to really respond to the specific question.
So are you telling me that nobody at the Federal Reserve is keeping track on a regular basis of the losses that it incurs?
We are not in a position to say whether there are losses or to respond in any other way to that particular.
Mr. Chairman, my time is up, but I have to tell you honestly, I am shocked to find out that nobody at the Federal Reserve, including the Inspector General, is keeping track of this.
And that is shocking, isn't it?
That is hogwash. Wow. 8 years already, and no one's doing an investigation. She deflected that like I've never seen.
Wow, that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, we're winding down on time. Rhea, do you have anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, okay. Well, the times, this is important though, as in, did you notice when he asked, if you don't do it, who does?
Yes.
And she had
Yeah,
an
wow.
answer. So I have a challenge to all the listeners, you guys sitting there. I'm happy to spend 20 of Dean's dollars as a reward for anybody that comes up with who is responsible for auditing the Fed then, if the Inspector General of the Board of Governors isn't.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? You have a major problem. Anyway, so because we're against time, I'll move on quickly on to something and end it on something positive. This is to do with a lot of guys have a problem with prostate cancer. They don't really have a great cure, and it looks as though there's been a breakthrough on treating prostate cancer. Let me just read this out. An experimental prostate cancer therapy could revolutionize treatment by shocking the tumor with a large amount of testosterone and then depriving it from the same hormone. Doctors from the Johns Hopkins University halted the progression of the disease. A man with advanced prostate cancer decided to try an unconventional method, and he's probably glad he did. Doctors shocked the tumour with a large amount of testosterone and has since been cancer-free. And it's back to you, Dean.
Thank you, Rhea. Once again, I want to say thanks to Scott Morell, Rhea Bow over there in the UK. Just a great show today. And I hope our special guest here that, as you said earlier, Rhea, is a video producer and editor, Christian Montalbano. Hopefully you had a very enjoyable time here on the show. And maybe there'll be another time.
Yeah, we thank you, Christian.
But,
you did a great job.
I want to thank everybody, and I want everybody not to forget to like us on Facebook and to hit the subscribe button on the show's YouTube channel. If you'd like to leave a comment, use the box below. Everybody needs to know that all our shows are archived and podcasted on the YouTube channel and as well on the iTunes platform now. If you'd like to share your story, ideas, and be a guest on the show, go to deanbleckman.com and email me directly. Or as I said earlier, you can just go to dean@deanbleckman.com. I would like to thank all my listeners for being with us today. From all of us at The Dean Bleckman Show, have a great day.
You've been listening to The Dean Bleckman Show, live from Long Island, New York. From all of us here, we'd like to thank you for tuning in. We look forward to hearing your comments via Facebook, Twitter, Skype, and email. And don't forget, you can visit the webpage anytime for the up-and-coming guest list. From all of us here, have a good evening.